You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 37. Today I'll be talking to Ken Flewellyn. Oh, that rhymes. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests, with more to come in the future as I get a feel for it. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. On Twitter, it's art_affairs. All right, so today's guest is artist and gallery director of ThinkSpace, Ken Flewellyn. Ken's work focuses largely on the intersection of cultures, and most often that of Japanese and hip-hop. But his work as a gallery artist isn't the only thing Ken gets up to. He's also gallery director of ThinkSpace. We talk about the duality of his career on the show, as well as how he first found and became active in the art community, what he's got coming up in 2021, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ken Flewellyn. Ken, welcome to the show, man. It's a real treat to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm super eager to dive into kind of both sides of your career, being both an artist and a gallery director. But I want to first talk a little bit about your background. And from what I read, you were born in Cleveland, Ohio, but I also know that you moved around a lot as a kid. So how long did you actually live in Cleveland? Do you have any memories of Cleveland at all?
No, I don't really have any memory of it. So I moved out here to California when I was 2 years old. Oh, okay. So I was just old enough to, I guess really old enough to only know the stories that I was told of how much of a pain I was to get across the country. My family the whole time they're like, we had to just put some snacks back there, and then that finally just shut you up. And I've been here as long as I can remember. We just moved around California quite a bit.
What was the reason for you guys moving so much? Like, was it work related or?
Well, so my dad moved out here because he came here for out here for business, and just seeing this place in the middle of winter, he told me that it was like 10 below back in Cleveland. He had brought my mom with him, and they came and saw California where it's like people are still just out at the beach and wearing bikinis, and they just came from like just frozen tundra. And so he came out here and he saw it and he was like, that's it. We have to move to California. This is incredible. And so they came back a second time. He worked for a while my mom took the bus around to see everything and she went to museums and just went to see everything in the city that my dad wasn't really able to see. And they put together a plan to get here. So when they came here, it was, very bare bones. We were still, I guess not necessarily poor, but still kind of working our way through into a city that's just crazy expensive like this. So we lived just further out of the city, like out in Walnut, and we just moved closer and closer and closer until we're here in LA. Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't moving to completely different parts of the country so much as just kind of a migration towards the center of LA.
Yeah, basically.
What kind of work did your parents do?
So both of which are in finance. They're both, or my dad is retired now, but they're both finance directors at my mom at a hospital, and then my dad for a city out here. And really, obviously not the entire time. I think my dad held that job for about 30 years or so. And my mom has been in like many different positions like that, running accounts receivable and this sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, they were in finance.
Interesting. So nothing art related, but you got started drawing at a young age. So I guess what sparked your interest if you didn't really have much of that around you from like family?
I mean, it was a lot of it just comic books and cartoons and anime. I mean, back then it was, like America would have their just love of different cultures that came into America. It was like brand new to us. I remember for a while it was Australia. We all were just like fawning over Crocodile Dundee and just we had this love for, yeah, for I guess cultural import, I suppose, right? And so then it was a lot of different cartoons that were coming in from Japan or ones that were made by Japanese animators that were written here. And so a lot of that just love for drawing started there. It was like a lot of ninjas and robots and just, yeah, kid stuff.
Well, and I also read that that Japanese culture in particular served as a quote unquote visual influence in your home since you were a kid. I read that in like several articles. So help me understand that. I guess, did you have any family members of Japanese descent, or like what was the influence there?
No, not necessarily. Again, I think it had to have something to do with that. There was a lot of Japanese influenced, I guess, decor coming to the United States just in general. And the neighborhood that I grew up in was, I'd say, like mostly white, then Japanese, then Filipino, then Vietnamese, and so on and so forth. It was like very heavily like Asian and white. So I saw that in the house very frequently in other people's homes as well. So, I mean, to me, it wasn't really a strange thing to see of just in general Asian influenced decor. My mom, it was like a combination of like some Japanese stuff, some like Chinese stuff, but it was just a lot of things that she just loved. If she was out, say coming back from work, she would stop off at places and find cool stuff, bring it back to the house. Yeah.
And I, from what I could tell, that sort of bled into your early drawing style. Like some of the early drawings that you did mimicked a lot of those patterns that you might see in Japanese block prints or something like that. I guess what about that cultural aesthetic in particular attracted you as much as it did?
I mean, I love the block print just because it was so narrative in style. There was a lot of story to be told in between each block if there were like triptychs. It was like this big, massive scene where you could just see so much going on and pick things out. I don't know, something about it was just so cool to me. And it's not something I really like zoned in on immediately in painting for my career. It's something I kind of returned to later, just realizing, man, I really wish I was making things that had like a little more of this or a little more of that.
Sure, sure. And did your parents encourage your interest in the arts? Like, is that something they were supportive of?
Yeah, I mean, they've been supportive of pretty much everything that I've run down endeavor-wise. I know it's like the stereotype is the family that doesn't want the artist because he's going to starve. And there were definitely moments where my mom was like, "You're going to starve. You get that, right?" But she never really kind of lost faith in that. And my daddy's always just been 100% behind me. And it's been a journey to get to this point. So, yeah, even then, I may have been into more like, I guess, practical versions of creativity, but they've always just been 100% down with what I got to do.
No, that's awesome. It's cool that they sort of just warned you. They're like, "Hey, you're gonna starve, but if that's your thing, go for it." And I know that you were really big into skate and hip hop culture, which obviously is there's, as far as the Venn diagram of cultures go, there's a lot of intersection between skate and hip hop culture in general. I guess, did you go out and skate a lot yourselves? Like, did you do skate parks or?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, back then that's all there was. So back around then, I was living close to Pomona, which is a smaller city. It's about 60, 70 minutes outside of LA. So just a good ways out. And there's skate parks and stuff like that, but they weren't starting to be built until I was in my, say, early, like preteens or what have you.
Mm.
And I think I'm part of like that last generation where your family would just kick you out of the house at the beginning of the day. Not like, because I tried a few times, like, I'd rather just kick it inside. And my dad, he's literally just told me, you got to go outside. You can't just be in here all day, dude. So he would just push me outside and you had to figure out what to do. And so you end up hanging out with other kids and, you meet someone's big brother that skateboards and you're like, wow, dude, we got to learn how to do that. Right. And so it's just, you start skating at a super young age. I mean, I skated I can't remember when I started. It was that young, and then skated until just a little after college it started.
So you're not doing that today? You don't skate anymore?
No, not really. I'm definitely too old, probably. Maybe. When the pandemic started, my girlfriend warned me about like you can't just be skateboarding around, dude. There's like a pandemic going on, which means there are no ICUs open, and so if you fall, like what then? Yeah, so
And another sort of adjacent, I guess, culture to hip hop skate is graffiti culture, and obviously with being in LA, there's a lot of that around. Was that something that you got up to at all?
no, I've always had like a just like a deep seated fear of prison and and my mom. Like I in no way wanted my mom or my dad to find out I'd been vandalizing something. I don't know what would have been worse, prison or them finding out. So it never really appealed to me.
Yeah. And obviously, I know you've talked a lot about this in articles and stuff, but music has always sort of served as a backbone, throughout your life and a common thread throughout all of these interests that you've had. In fact, you played drums and trumpet from what I read, when you were a kid growing up. So I guess how did you first take an interest in making music? Because that's a fairly large leap from, being interested to and enthusiastic about music to actually like wanting to make it yourself.
Even with that, I started really young. My family just absolutely loved music as well. So I grew up listening to a lot of just like soul and just Motown and jazz and this sort of thing. My mom's like a big, just like jazz person, and so I don't know, something that's been around the house so long that at a super young age, I played the flute first, and that was in elementary school. And then the trumpet once I was in high school, and the drums also while I was in high school, and continued that most of the way through college. I think I'd still be playing if I didn't live in an apartment, really.
Well, you had a high school band too, from what I could tell, called KCB, Ken and the Crazy Bastards.
Yeah.
How did that become a thing? Did you guys do gigs and stuff? Like, how big was that?
Back then it was everything to us. So it was myself and then three of my friends, all from the same high school. And we had put this band together so it started off with just me and my friend Steve, and just an incredible bassist, that dude, and had built like a little recording studio in his room, a little mic like hung from the ceiling. And him and I would just kind of tour around with music. And then come to find out, two of our other friends that we hung out with, both of which played guitar in varying degrees of like okay to great. And so we're like, we could actually do this. All of us had this love for almost like no effect style punk rock, right? And so it really kind of just started there and progressed beyond that. We played a few shows, and most notably, we played Culver Palooza, which was like it's like a talent show type thing at our school. And it was a lot of fun. And then beyond that, I continued to play in bands, but that one was probably the most fun.
Okay, very cool. And you were also big into photography, so you got up to like all the things. Like what kind of photography were you into? Was it like concert photography, nature photography, portraiture, with all of the above?
So most of it was me going to the skate park and just taking photos at the skate park.
Nice.
And so, all that started there. And then, if I went on a trip, we would go hiking or something like this. I went to Hawaii with my dad once for 2 weeks, which was incredible. And like just I look back now, it's such a long time to be on vacation. And we went there, and I just took tons and tons of nature photos, and just thought it was like I'd never seen anything like it. You got to keep in mind, I'm a city mouse, so there's no like waterfall hikes or anything I was aware of.
Right.
Yeah, so it was just like I shoot everything that's in front of me.
No, that's awesome. And so, with all of these different creative interests that you had, from making music to drawing to photography, when it actually came time to go to college, you weren't initially focused on anything artistic. Like from what I understand, you were going into engineering. So I guess why were you, kind of setting aside all these creative things to go into engineering, and like what kind of engineering were you planning to do?
Well, I started in college thinking these things are great, but I don't want to starve. Like, I don't think that's anyone's intention. You go to college, you're like, let's put a few $1,000s into this endeavor so that I can, struggle to, make enough to eat a sandwich at the end of the week. Like, I didn't want that to be a thing. And I was already really good at math. And so the idea was like, I need to find something that was going to allow me to engage both sides of my brain. Like, allow me to find a career that was going to spend, just pay money, but then also be able to do something creative in that way. I used to love working on electronics when I was younger. A lot of it was just sort of like kit bashing. I was taking stuff that was already built and opening it and using them for other purposes. Yeah, and then of course, I'm at college and I'm like, you know what? I'm already eating ramen so frequently. Maybe starve is not that big of a deal. Maybe, maybe I just lean into that.
Right. So, while you were at college, you is when you sort of shifted your interest to illustration. Was that at Cal State, or did you go to a different college after you decided to change to illustration?
That was at Cal State, and really a lot of that was just happenstance. Like I realized a lot of what's happened to me career-wise over the years has just been, oh wow, this opportunity has presented itself in a very strange way. Let's just follow it and see what happens. And so with that, it was that I ended up having to drop a class, and it was a very late drop. It was like a writing class, and the teacher was just like the worst. Like I still remember it now, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but the gist of it was, you shouldn't write. You shouldn't write.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, then I'm dropping this class. Like, why would I be here for that noise? Later, she was surprised that I dropped the class, which was strange. I'm like, what? How could you possibly be surprised about that? So fine, I had to drop the class, and I was living in the dorms. The dorms had a 12-unit minimum in order to live in the dorms.
Oh, wow.
Or then pay what the rent was for those places. So I went to Cal State Northridge. The dorms weren't like they are on like Porky's or these movies where it's like a room and there's like 12 dudes that live in it somehow. It was like a 2-bedroom apartment, so it was expensive to have to pay for it as at not a dorm rate, and that was just not going to be an option. So it's like you have to find a class and you got to do it quick. And the only class I could find that would take me like 4 weeks, whatever it was, into the semester was a drawing class. And I was like, okay, all right, it's drawing too. You like to draw a little bit. You haven't done it in a while, but how could this possibly go wrong? This is a winner. And from then on out, I couldn't not do it. It caught me so quickly and just so hard that I had to just push further into art beyond that.
Well, it's interesting how it was sort of serendipitous, where you just kind of, it was the last course left on a roster sheet or whatever, and it's like, okay, let's do this, and then that's now your career. That launched you into a career. That's fantastic. I guess the focus was shifted to illustration. So I guess why illustration and not say photography, or what was it about that drawing class that you were like, okay, this is what I want to focus on for my career?
So with photography, I was going to the school just about the time that digital was starting to supersede making actual prints, and I just really loved working inside of a dark room and kind of getting dirty a little bit. And then seeing that digital was starting to go that route and that there just weren't going to be many places for prints in that way, I started to kind of lose my love for it. And at the same time, I'd been drawing more and more, and just starting to realize that I can create a lot more. I can create what I was making with photography and so much more, especially if I just put the time into it. And so I just started to lean that way. And before I knew it, I wasn't really taking as many photography classes. I was taking classes from time to time that kind of met the road in between them, like Photoshop classes and this sort of thing. But it wasn't really the same being a photographer once I started to draw and paint.
Interesting. So I guess what was your career goal at that point, focusing on illustration? Like, what were you planning to do after college?
Wow, just no clue. I just had no clue. Like, when I think back, I wish that there was a class that they were offering then that gave like a realistic idea of what to expect as a professional once you leave school. We had a class like that called Senior Projects, and it was that a teacher could teach you about what's going on outside of school, but it didn't make sense for a working artist to tell you how the art world works specifically, because they are the product in the art world. Right. So it'd be like a potato teaching me how to make French fries. It makes no sense. Like, why would I do that? Or vice versa. And so all the information that I got were from artists who were relevant in the 70s and the 80s. And that what they're doing now is not talking to gallerists about doing anything. They're really just showing up with their stuff, and somebody's showing it. And it was old enough that they were still taking paper portfolios and CDs places, And then meanwhile, I had a teacher, Eric Mark Sandberg. He's also an artist that shows in our scene. and he did like a presentation for senior project, and he was very clear. Wow, there's like no jobs out here, dude. There's nothing. Like the landscape is barren, and you only find this out senior year at the end of your year. You're just like, oh wow, this is something I should have known like 2 years ago. But so, but his suggestion is like, listen, there are very few jobs, and I have an agent, and it's still dicey right now. Things turn around. All you can really do is just paint, continue to love to paint, and it'll start to kind of come through on the other end. And so the thought then was that if I could just get any jobs designing really anything, toy design, book illustration, pretty much anything, that's what I was going to get into and just find a way to hold those positions until I can, start putting out my own products.
Okay, and that's sort of what you did after college is going into graphic design work, website design, logo design, show event ads, stuff like that. Were these all like freelance jobs, or were they staff positions? What kind of work was it?
Most of which were freelance jobs. So, I mean, I did one staff position as like, or not one, I guess I had a few of these. So I did a visual effects job for a little bit. I was what they call an end painter at a like stereoscopic 3D studio. And so that's one of those jobs that on the surface sounded really cool. They're like, all you have to do is we're going to create these images off of these frame by frame. So say you wanted to turn Ice Age the movie into 3D, something that was not previously shot in 3D. They would chop out the elements that they wanted to be 3D. Somebody using a piece of software would make it look 3D. And then I would have to repaint the backgrounds back in wherever they've done this. And it sounds awesome. You're like, all right, that's cool. And just digitally paint all day. And it just ended up being the worst. It was so bad. It's one of those jobs where you are expected to keep like an hour tally. So it's not deadlines that are like at the end of the month, you have to have this done. Somebody would come up to you and tell you your frames, like you're not working fast enough. There's not enough frames for an hour. I mean, you have to have this much done by the end of the week. So frame by frame, like you gotta move a little faster. And they have to be accurate.
Wow. So it turns into like a commodity, like almost like, with a stopwatch next to you, timing you. That's crazy.
Which is, it is the opposite of what you'd expect as an artist leaving college. You're like, man, I have all these great aspirations and dreams to do this, that, and the other. What's that? You want me to just kind of paint sky frame by frame and then get on my case when I don't finish a few hundred by the end of the day? This seems like a lot.
Yeah, that's insane. So throughout all these different freelance jobs that you were doing, and the visual effects work, were you still able to make time for your own art while you were doing all these projects?
It was, yeah. I mean, it was a little difficult then. I look back then and I'm still like, I had so much more energy than I have now, and even then, it's just I was working so many different jobs. I was getting a painting out every few months, That visual effects job, that one was the only time where I worked a single job, and it was far enough away that I had to drive 4 hours to get to work.
Oh, wow.
Out here we have fire season where it's just the heat coupled with like the brush and everything from previous rains. There's always like big fires that happen up in the valley. And in order for me to get to that job, I had to pass through those fiery areas. It would take me 4 to 4.5 hours to get to work. It was a night shift job. And then I'd have to drive home, which going home, there's no traffic, but it was still an hour and a half without the traffic.
Crazy.
So you combine that with sleep, because you still got to sleep. I didn't do anything but just go to work and then come back home. And then with all the other jobs, it was just stacking too many. It's just like, I have to do this job, but then I got to do this job. And then maybe I'll get 30 minutes of painting in tonight, maybe an hour in tomorrow night, and eventually finish a painting,
So, you mentioned painting. So at what point did painting enter into things? Because, previously you were doing drawing, you were doing photography. During college, did you take any painting classes, or how did you learn to paint in oil?
So I took an illustration course, and our teacher, so I had 2 different teachers in illustration, one of which, Laurel Long, she's known for like a series of these, illustrating a series of these fairy books. They're phenomenal paintings. She's an incredible painter. And so she kind of got me started with painting there. And I was doing a little bit of, I guess, both both drawing and painting. I did some scratchboard for a little bit, but that class was really more about discovering good compositions and visual storytelling. And she would walk around and show you some techniques on painting, but it wasn't necessarily her job to teach you to paint. And then the second teacher was Alex Gross, who was he's also just a phenomenal painter, and he was much better at like also kind of teaching you how to paint, but he was like a very harsh critic. So it was, you got like a little bit of what was happening in the world outside of this, and at the same time, you know, he had these moments where he was just very nurturing and help you out with stuff. But then you're just like not excited to deal with someone who gives critiques like that. You're like, Jesus, this guy, come off it already. And then later, you know, you get in real life, you get much worse critiques. You're like, man, I kind of wish things were as easy as they were when I was dealing with Alex.
That's funny. Was that all, I guess, oil painting, or was that different kinds of painting? Like, I guess, when did was that the point where oil came into the picture, or were you doing acrylics at that time?
So I was kind of trying a bunch of different things because it wasn't really clear how to use them all too well. And Alex was the first person that was like, you should stop all this scratchboard. Like just saying like you will have more, you will be able to just get more eyes on your stuff if you're painting. It's difficult for this, that, and the other, right? Doing scratchboard specifically. And so I'd give it a little more time. I actually taught myself the ins and outs of actually painting once I was out of college. Because I left college kind of a middling to terrible painter, but like a decent draftsman. And then over time, just taught myself to paint better, hung out with other artists, went to their studios. They'd give me like tips and tricks on how to do things if they were nice people. They'd teach you a few things, you know.
Right on. So, I mean, you mentioned it earlier with, you know, effectively 5-6 hour commutes and stacking multiple jobs on top of each other. I guess, how did you balance, or how did you make time to make art? Like, when were you doing it?
Pretty much just at night. Like, I think a lot of artists already have this problem of becoming more creative at night than they are during the day anyway, just like nocturnal by nature. And so I'd work these jobs. I'd get home, maybe between both jobs, get home at like 10 sometimes, and then just stay up until 2, 3 in the morning painting. Like, if I had the time, and I would stay up crazy late, sleep 4 or 5 hours, and just go back to the next job. And again, when you're young, it just none of that matters. Like, yeah, 4 hours of sleep. I mean, it's better than that one time I got 2 hours of sleep. Now, you know, I had a good 8 hours of sleep last night, but I could still go for a nap. Like, it's like that. It's the weekend for me, so it'd be nice to just kind of like chill out, but also it'd be nice to channel that younger dude who just had that like kind of push hard late into the night.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that. And so at some point, though, you know, I guess it was 2010, 2011, you ended up injuring your right hand, and not like, you know, something small, you know, like a sprain or whatever. It's something that would require surgery, I believe. So I guess tell me about that. Like, what was it? Was that some kind of a nerve-related injury, muscle injury? What happened?
So then I was working 2 jobs. I worked in a medical warehouse, and then the second job was at a cable studio as a master control operator. And master control operator was more up my alley. It was basically just running servers and scheduling TV. So I'm just sitting there working with a bunch of computers around me. It's like just perfectly cold during the day. It was fantastic. And then I would go to this medical warehouse, and it was just, you know, just straight up on some like move quickly, lift stuff. And I ended up tearing some ligaments in my hand and damaging some cartilage. And I wasn't really sure what had gone on. I just knew that one day I was working there and I realized I couldn't really close my hand. And it had gone numb on one portion of it. Just like the bottom 2 fingers had gone numb. And so I went and told my boss. And, you know, it's something that happened at work. So I had to be put on workers' comp. Like, there was no... And I was completely fine with, hey, I can still come in here and work and do something that's not this lifting part, but either way, she's like, you have to go on workers' comp. That's just how that goes. So placed on workers' comp and having to go through surgery after surgery to get everything fixed. Everything is mostly better now. Say like 85% of movement in my hand is back, which is nice, and it just took some time. But because of it, again, it's serendipitous. I found serendipity, I guess. I found my way down another career path because I had nothing I could do with my job. And I wanted to know why all my gallery stuff, we'll put that in quotations as well, because it was like coffee shops and underground warehouse parties where people were like seeing my art. There was a bunch of curators there sipping wine, enjoying it. It was, a bunch of hippies hanging out. So I couldn't really, I wanted to just take a look at the work that I had made previously and just figure out how to be better. And I wasn't going to be able to paint, but I could still go and get some information. And a friend of mine, and this is somewhat convoluted, but not really, a friend of mine's wife, her sister's husband, runs a portion of ThinkSpace. He's LC, the co-owner of ThinkSpace. And so I had already known him, just kind of seeing him back and forth at barbecues, and there was already like this reputation of this dude of giving like these free portfolio reviews every Friday. And at that time, I'd already showed at Cannibal Flower, which was his underground one-night event, fairly frequently. And so I brought some work into him. Like, here's the work that I made for my solo show that I did at this coffee shop, just to get some information from him. My hand doesn't currently work, but I would like to know, once it does, like how I could make this better, just because this is, it's not going super swell so far. And then going in and talking to him, he's, if you know him, he's just like honest almost to a fault in moments. So I think I brought him like 15 paintings, and he was like, he looked at them for a while, he was like really thinking, and then he kind of took 5 of the paintings and moved them away from the other ones, and he was like, those 10 over there, don't ever do that again. Like, I don't want to ever see that again. That is weird, dude. And and so
It's amazing.
So I get this like very like harsh upfront critique, but it's what I wanted anyway. I guess I got exactly what I wanted. And he's like, but these 5, they show like a lot of promise. And here's how you can make them better. Here's what's wrong with them. Here's like what parts will be difficult for you as a painter. And then from then on out, I just kind of got hooked in doing that portion of it. I couldn't paint, but I could be there for portfolio reviews. LC had me in a couple of times because I could describe technique things to people, even though I couldn't paint. Or I could explain to him why he didn't like something, or how it happened.
Interesting.
So, that started there, and then started with Cannibal Flower. A lot of stuff just kind of took off from there.
So how long were you not able to paint? Like, how long did that kind of put your painting on the back burner?
Oh, it must have been like a year and a half, maybe a little longer. I mean, I was going to physical therapy for 2 years to get it to where it was mostly normal again. But once I was able to get the cast off and able to do anything painting-wise, I just started as fast as I could. And it was still just like go in and see the physical therapist. The surgery I got was very strange, so the physical therapist was a little confused at first, and then we found something that would work.
And didn't you at one point even start painting left-handed just because like you were getting restless and wanted to keep painting?
Yeah. It's one of those, again, where you're just like, just the greatest of hopes and just absolute turds, those things. They're so bad. It became like a great thing to be able to do, and there's still some stuff that I do left-handed. I just can't take the extreme long portions of time painting with my right hand anymore. It's just not a thing. And so, larger areas, I'll still use my left hand. Anything that requires any detail work, I have to use my right hand.
Okay. Were you generally ambidextrous before then, or was that just like, I got nothing else?
I got nothing else is really all it was. And there was just so many other things I had to like learn to do with the other hand. Like I had to get a left-handed can opener. Who knew that they made left-handed can openers? It's so crazy.
I think, wasn't that in a Simpsons episode or something? Was it the Leftorium?
It's the only reason why I knew I could find one was because of that episode. I'm like, well, that doesn't really exist, right? It's like, oh, they definitely exist.
It's amazing. So, I guess, once you finally got back into painting, 2013 was when you really started showing, at least from your CV, started showing a lot more of your work, including Cannibal Flower, like you mentioned before. So I guess, how did you get into that scene? How did you first start making some of those connections? Even before you synced up with LC and started the portfolio reviews, how did you start, getting your work in front of gallerists or coffee shops or wherever?
So, at first I went through that, the same thing I was taught by those teachers in senior projects class. You just got to go door to door with your portfolio and demand to be seen. That has literally never worked for anyone ever. I don't know where that came from. So I mean, yeah, I put on like a suit. I was like, that's what people do, right? And put on a suit, go to these galleries, immediately treated like I was Jehovah's Witness or something. People were just like looking out and not really sure if they should open the door. Then they open it and I go, hey, this is my portfolio. Like, oh, cool. Do you have a CD? A CD? All right, give them a CD and then just never hear back from anyone. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not how any of this works. And then working with Cannibal Flower really kind of helped get a lot of that going. So, I mean, that show was one night. It was one night only. Anyone can show in it. So you bring a piece there. You had to come back and get it at the end of the night or early morning the next day. So, like, of course, a lot of artists are like, I don't want to go anywhere early morning. I'm going to stay until the end of the show, and at 1 a.m., I'm going to grab my stuff and go home. And so I did those pretty much every month for years and years and years. I don't even remember how long. And it was cool just to have, like, you'd have, other artists. You get to sit down with them, give each other critiques, talk about just everything. It was like you created this little art community, and there are always just big, weird shows full of, like, weird performances. And so it made it super easy to really want to get into this scene. And you come to find out later, curators were coming by. Different curators, different galleries, they were coming by because they could get people when they were fresh and new, or they could just come and see like a strange act. It didn't really matter. Come by and see some like angle grinder dancing or flame eating. You just come and like, all right, let's just go and see some weird stuff, see some art. And so I think a lot of me getting into this industry worked with that. And at some point, I went from just showing at Cannibal Flower to working with LC directly in putting on Cannibal Flower. It was him, his wife Valentine, and Michelle, which is his partner back then. And he was like, I need someone to, go with me. We'll scope out locations. I mean, we would find just the weirdest spots. It wasn't always galleries. More often than not, it was like, so this hippie has a loft over on Skid Row. It is just thrashed, so we're going to have to clean it up. We're going to have to build some temporary walls, but we can turn this into a gallery. And the first few times I was like, this guy's insane. Nobody could make this place hospitable. It looks awful in here, and within a day we would have it looking like, okay, we could actually hang art in here and it wouldn't look crazy.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So, I mean, during this time where you were getting more involved with Cannibal Flower, was LC still sort of giving you advice on artwork?
Yeah, I mean, he still does to this day. So now we're really more on like, I guess then he was more like a mentor. And now both of us will kind of just like put together compositions, because he's also an artist, put together compositions and then send them back and forth to each other. Like, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? I mean, I know the viewers, the listeners can't actually see me right now, but that's one of his pieces behind me. And then also mine over here. So nice. It's one of those things where we just continue to have that same art relationship that I got from everyone in Cannibal Flower of just sharing ideas back and forth.
Very cool. And also, like you mentioned, he's one of the co-founders of ThinkSpace, where you work now today. So I guess, how did you ultimately hook up with ThinkSpace, Andrew, Sean, and start working at the gallery? Like, was it that connection with LC that was the gateway into that?
Yeah. So, I mean, LC, he had assistants fairly frequently that would kind of help him out, but over extended portions of time. So before me, one of his assistants, you may know her as well, painter named Ariel DeAndrea, just incredible realist painter. She was his assistant previously as well. And so I was already working with him, and I would come in with him on the portfolio days, help him out with portfolio review days. And this is back when Andrew Hosner wasn't working at the gallery full time as he is now. He was working full time, but he had another job he was doing during the day. He was a marketing exec over at Century Media, big like metal label. So he was doing that thing during the day, doing ThinkSpace at night. So I'd just be there with LC during the day, helping him out with stuff. And I think after a certain point, Sean was like, "Yeah, so we know you've been like in here working the entire time." It's like very clear, I guess. She's like, "I already know what's going on. So how do you feel about just coming to work for us?" And I mean, if you've ever been on disability, the amount of money they pay you is laughable. And so I was getting to a point where like, this is about to be done. My physical therapy is just about up. So I have to figure it out. I got to go get a job. And I really don't want to go back to the warehouse. Like first off, I can't. Like, I literally can't do it. And I don't know where else they'll put me. And so when they offered me the job, I jumped at the chance to work at a gallery. Something I didn't even think I'd really find my way doing, and again, slipped right into another job.
And what was your role initially? Like, what were you initially doing when you first started?
So mostly like logistic stuff. I was helping Elsie sort of pack orders and clean the gallery, just like the stuff that keeps the gallery running day to day. And everything that goes on there's the question like, why do galleries need to take 50%? And it's like, well, they have staff, they have lights to keep on, we keep artwork stored properly and clean it, and this, that, and the other. So it's just a lot of that stuff that kept us on the day to day is what I did at Elsie's direction.
Okay. And now as gallery director, what do your day-to-day responsibilities usually consist of?
Well, so the gallery itself has grown quite a bit since then. I mean, I started at ThinkSpace 9 years ago. And, since then, Andrew's come back in to do this only full-time, which for him, if you know him, full-time for him is still like 60 hours a week. He's still just like constantly on it. Yeah. And because of that, we've been able to scale things pretty large. Same with Sean as well. I mean, Sean is senior director. And so just everyone being able to like wholly focus on the place, it's really kind of just accelerated. And so now most of what I do is I work in logistics for us, organizing import and export of artwork and shipments, and pretty much anything Andrew has like an idea that he needs to get done, he can send over to me, and then I'll make it happen. Okay. I'm also our web developer, and I don't know, I wear a ton of different hats. Wear a ton of different hats. I mean, and now like our staff is growing a bit bigger as well. Before I was also packing all of our prints and all this, but now we have Anthony Clarkson, another great artist in our scene. He's shown with ThinkSpace since day one. He works inside of the gallery, like mostly running our print shop and this sort of thing. And then if you've ever met Becca's been there forever. Just absolutely love her. So yeah, it's really just like I'm just day-to-day operations. Make sure everything that if you're a collector and you want to know what happened to your order, or you want to change anything about it, change your invoices, any of that stuff, I'm the guy there for that.
Okay, interesting. And when it comes time to actually have an opening, like I guess you guys have one coming up with Georgie Coe and Brad Woodfin next week. So like, what is your role in a gallery opening? Do you coordinate with the artist for transportation? Do you get into the hanging? Like what exactly do you do for that?
So with that now, where we find ourselves is, so I used to hang the shows alongside them. And if a show is, if it's like large enough with a huge amount of works, then it's pretty much all hands on deck. Everybody's hanging work. With a show like this, I don't know if it'll be absolutely necessary for Georgie Coe and Brad Woodfin. So normally during these times, I will be organizing everything for the previous show's shipments while we're setting up for the next show, and then anything that's needed for this show. So at Current, we have many different packages and things inbound for that show to make sure that we have like all the pieces they're arriving, or this and this and that. So we, take care of that as the show comes closer. Once we get into install week, the guys will hang. And while they hang, I'll be taking care of, again, logistics, all that stuff that was happening for the last shows still needs to happen even during the weeks that we're setting up.
And so also, in addition to all the stuff that you kind of just described, last November, you had your curatorial debut with the Tapas Group show. So tell me about that. I guess, how did that opportunity come up? And is that something that you'd been wanting to do for a while?
I mean, yeah, it really is. It's super cool to be able to get other artists in on these shows because, you spend all this time trying to get your foot in the doors, and it's just really difficult to find a gallery that fits great for you. Like, it was always explained to me that you're not just going to cold call galleries because they may not be the right person to sell your work or the right person to believe in your work. And things at ThinkSpace only work because everyone there believe in the artists that are in these shows, So at first it was a little nerve-wracking because you have to keep in mind everything that I'm doing with that. I'm also still doing all the logistics work at ThinkSpace and also had pieces due for shows coming up. So it was like a lot of juggling, lots of plates in the air, as they'd say, right? And then the more I got into it and talking to the artists, I'm like, this is so awesome. Like, there's so many people that are in these shows that I would love to give them the opportunity to show here, and I've always been a fan of their work, and this is a perfect time for me to introduce them to a larger collector base or something like this. And then it was cool to have artists that I know that are like very much established And it's a small work show, and for a lot of artists, they're like, small works take just as long, so I don't know if I'd be down with that. And so for some of these like really established folks, I was just like really like appreciative that they'd take part in the show.
Sure,
it ended up
sure.
coming out great. And then I think I mentioned I'm more a web developer as well, so I put together our collector previews, and so I was just putting it together as I was getting works, almost like I guess fantasy football, locking my lineup. I'm just sitting there like, oh man, this is gonna be super sweet, and I'm still expecting this from Georgie Core. I'm still like, as I'm just sitting there plugging things in and taking a look at the show, and my girlfriend's sitting there like, dude, why are you working? You're off work. I'm like, it's not work right now. Look at this. It's all looking super good.
That's amazing. It's cool. I mean, with that much excitement, do you think you'll do more of this in the future?
I think so. Yeah. I did really enjoy it, and I do have a couple of other show ideas under my belt that I was, hoping to kind of get at. The small work show I thought was perfect because I collect work as well, but I don't exactly have like the $10,000 to $13,000 to purchase pieces, and it's just really cool to get in on some of these artists, especially as they're young, at like very approachable price points and pieces that fit into almost any collection. So it's like, this is perfect. You can buy someone a Christmas gift or something like this, have it be like this original thing for them to have, or just add to your collection. If your place is, not an inch between everything, you can fit little stuff somewhere.
I think you're in such a unique position, just having experienced both sides of the gallery artist relationship. It's something I've talked to Susanna Kelly about as well, gallerist and artist, right? Do you think that working as an artist and seeing that side of things has helped you become better at the work you do in the gallery, and like vice versa? Do you think having experience in the gallery side of things, interacting with so many different kinds of artists, has helped you grow as an artist in the ways you may not have, otherwise had?
Definitely so. I mean, as an artist, especially just understanding how the bread is baked, or whatever the idiom is, understanding how it works is super important. I would suggest any artist that's just really trying to figure this out, if you can intern somewhere, or do one of these art fairs. They have them all over the states. I know that there's a few of them that go on out in Austin. They're kind of like these outdoor art markets. Doing that once or twice just to kind of see how any of this works is super important. Like it's changed my career, obviously as a gallerist, but especially as a painter. And then on the other end, it's really good to have like this empathy for artists and understand where they're coming from, or the artist that I know, like, all right, well, this dude might be a little late. I think, and I already understand why. Like, I'm in a very similar boat, so I'm still gonna like poke him in a few days just to like, hey, where you at, man?
Right on. So, I mean, I guess, even though your day-to-day responsibilities have increased over the years with the gallery, you're still managing to make time to paint. And probably it might be a little easier than it was, like you said, when you were stacking jobs together. But I guess, when do you usually make time to paint now? Is it something, that you did like you did before, where it was mostly nights and weekends, or do you have more of a dedicated time for it?
I mean, it's pretty much just nights and weekends now. So I've talked to other artists. I don't get how they're doing this, because they got kids too, and they're always like, "Oh man, I'm mostly creative at night, but then my girl's like, she's got to go to bed," and it's like, I don't know what to do about this. I'm like, yeah, that's life, dude. That's what everyone is doing right now. You get off work, you come home, you eat dinner, you gotta do some dishes, whatever it is, and then you get a couple of hours to work on something and go to bed. And it seems like whether you got kids or anything, everyone has that same sort of hustle that they're on to keep like life balanced with the other stuff. This is people who have full-time jobs that go alongside painting.
Yeah. No, and so 2017, I guess, marked your first solo show at ThinkSpace, Stay Gold. So how did that show come together? Obviously, working at the gallery, I think it's an obvious choice to be the venue for your solo show. But is that something that you'd been talking to them about doing for a while, and it sort of just culminated in that show?
So I didn't know that I'd ever really be showing at ThinkSpace, because it was never really the anticipation. Again, I was always under the impression that you find a gallery that wants to show your work, believes in the work that you make, and this whole thing. So working at a gallery did not necessarily mean I'm going to show at this gallery, or at least I don't want to think that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Like, if I remember I went to the movies with Andrew I mean, probably like 8 years ago. And we went and I like tried to pay him, and he was like, "No, movies are free." I'm like, "What kind of person would I be to just assume that you were taking me to the movies for free?" Like, I really appreciate it. This is a super awesome thing to do as a boss, but it'd be an unreasonable expectation just to think that since I'm here, just hook me up. Right. So
Right.
never really expected a show there. And then Andrew asked me to be in, I think first show I did was an auction that was going on at the Long Beach Museum of Art was the first piece that he asked me to put into something. And which was just, I was over the moon about. I got to, first off, go to one of these events, these like sort of like museum events. I was going to say hoity-toity, but hardly, because it was, exactly what you think. There was a band playing, and there was a bunch of people hovering over the coconut-crusted shrimp, and you're like, Jesus, this guy's had so much shrimp. When do I get some shrimp? You're just like watching the hors d'oeuvres getting like mashed on. So it's like a regular event, nothing like crazy hoity-toity, but it was still super cool to go to this like museum by the sea. I have artwork up during this like silent auction. My piece was auctioned off and sold. It was, one of those like milestone moments. I have the program and I have all that stuff just saved over here on my records.
Nice.
And so I mean that kind of started that there. And Andrew from time to time would then ask me to be in shows that fit the style of work that I was doing. And so they'd be the group shows with smaller pieces and this whole thing. So when he asked me to be to have a solo there, I just was still taken aback, super excited, ready to just kind of take it on in any way that I could. Like, I'll take any room. If you want me to hang this stuff outside next to the dumpster, I'm in, dude.
That's amazing. So I guess at the timing for that show, was that after your hand had healed all the way up again, or were you still kind of struggling with that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean that was already after my hand had mostly had come back to normal. But even still with that show, I moved a little slow. Like, again, if I put too much time in on it, it's like I start to feel it. And then I was still doing I'm going to just stay up crazy late and then go into work. The gallery doesn't open until noon, so just paint until 4 a.m. And then, or really, paint until 1, walk across the street to the bar and have a beer, then come back home and then just paint until 4, go to work, just only a little tired. So I was still able to pull that then, and doing that body of work, it took me much longer than I thought. I'd never just done painting consecutively like that, and made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot, and, went into the next show ready to make the very same mistakes.
So let's dive into your work a little bit more. Obviously one of the most noticeable aspects of your work is the blending of cultures, Japanese culture, hip hop culture, sort of working at the intersection of those two things. I guess, does that tie back to your interest in Japanese culture growing up? Is that sort of a lifelong love for you?
It is. I mean, I think it is something that is both something from my past that far back, but I also took quite a few sociology classes when I was in college that really kind of started to inform this work as well. So I mean, it's the reason why. I guess I'd gotten used to going to museums and going to galleries and seeing very hypersexualized portraiture as what a lot of people made. And it's just, and nothing against people who are making those things, but it's just not something that interests me too much. And especially, you take some, so I took Asian American Studies when I was in school and took Women's Studies, African American History. This is just in Religious Studies, which is also super fascinating. And so taking all these courses and looking at people's different perspectives on the world, it made it easier for me to then think, okay, if I wanted to introduce this love of mine of a culture that's not mine, and also if I want to paint women, I have to find a way to do this that is going to, I guess, hold them in a certain sort of light of respect and strength and, this sort of thing.
Sure.
And again, to each their own with everything else. I really enjoy doing this in this particular way.
For sure. No. And also just kind of blending it with, the hip hop culture. I guess, how did that come about? How did you get that kind of motif where you're kind of mixing and, incorporating all these different types of cultures together?
Well, it was thinking about, so hip hop culture is something that was originally, created in the hood by Black people, Latino people. This thing that was once just culture had become this international craze and subculture. And that subculture has imprinted itself all over the world, right? And so when I look at these people who are anyone who's here in America and they have this traditional background or upbringing, there is some sort of assumption that they can't also then have this like complex subculture like just deep inside of them as well. And so, like, thinking about it is like, this is like an awesome sort of visually a great sort of dichotomy, but also very true to form with where I live and how I've known everything here. How many people I know that are from these very traditional backgrounds, but are like the illest b-boys you've ever met. Just crazy out there. And if you play by a lot of the same rules that we get used to watching television or what have you, you're never able to like be able to picture someone being just these bold people that are also able to embrace something that is just so like traditional, you know?
Sure. No, and I think it's interesting how hip hop does have that sort of inclusivity where, they do embrace several other cultures. I mean, the Wu-Tang Clan name came from a Hong Kong film, right? I mean, it's like so. That seems like a very natural thing, just in sort of at the core of what the hip hop ethos even is. Another big kind of component of your work that kind of weaves in and out of that aesthetic in general is boomboxes. Obviously you make big use of that. At a glance, is that serving as sort of a totem to represent hip hop, or does that have sort of a larger nostalgia tied to it for you as something as sort of a symbol of reverence or something like that?
I guess it does serve as like this totem for hip hop, but it's also just something that was at every skate park, because you can't just be like skating. And also, there were not iPods or anything. People had Discmans at most. Maybe you had like the Walkman, and you weren't going to just take your dope Walkman to go skating and land on it somehow. So somebody would always have a boombox out playing something, playing like mixtapes. And so it's something that I've always known from my past. And then it also is just like this perfect icon of what hip hop is,
Sure.
Like it was like this big, just like, or at least larger than life, like just sort of cultural item that, if you were walking around with one out on your hood, it was incredible. This sort of thing was incredible for when it came out. And even now, there's still people that make them, despite the fact that everything is digital. There's still something about like that image of this, like I've got this box full of bass.
No, it's so iconic too. I mean, I remember you'd see these people in the 80s just carrying them on their shoulders, just walking down the street.
Yeah.
It's such a cool thing. I mean, it's amazing. So how does your creative process usually start? Like, do you do much in the way of like sketching? Do you start with photo shoots? Like, what's the initiation stage for you, I guess?
So, I mean, I do a lot of sketching first, but the sketching is mostly for me to figure out the concept of the piece. I'm very methodical in how I work, and a lot of it is just because of the time. Like I'm always so strapped on time, painting wise. I don't have the time to just like sit down and pontificate on what am I going to do now. Maybe I'll put a little paint on the canvas and just stare at it for a while. I have to know beginning to end, where does this start and where does this end, because you got 2 hours a night to do this, and then you have the weekends, but you got to really just, keep things going. And so most of the time I will draw just to figure out what is the concept that I want behind the piece. And then I'll do a photo shoot. I try to make sure that the photo shoots are less structured so that I don't find everything starting to feel stiff, I'm not really like a great photography director because, again, all my history before as a photographer was like, these dudes are already going to do these kickflips, so I just got to sit here and take photos of them doing what they're already going to do. I think a few of my early models can attest to that it's like, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, yeah, me neither. Like, I don't think either of us know what's going on, but we're going to figure it out. And so I gotten used to then figuring out, okay, if I'm going to do these photo shoots, then maybe I need to both take photos when I'm like trying to find the pose, but also, if we're chilling, just take some photos while we're chilling. And a lot of the times those like chilling photos ended up being better paintings than any of like the compositions I had put through. I guess a few times I also just like set up a camera like, hey, listen, I'm going to have a camera that's just shooting video. And it's really only to catch you like, once we're like chilling, you like relax. There could be like some great photos in that, and I'll just pull stills. And that's worked a few times too. I just have to treat it different depending on which model and how they work best.
So do you find that your, I guess, final composition evolves a ton from what your original plan was? Because it sounds like there's various points along the way where there's these evolution steps where, your original sketch and composition might deviate a lot from the photo shoot, and then what gets painted might deviate a lot from what gets taken as far as photos go. So, I mean, are you okay with that sort of natural evolution of your work?
Yeah, I mean, it basically does that until the plan is completely set into place. Even when I look at some of these paintings, I do crop things quite a bit. Like, I do like to create these like very tight scenes, and I can picture and remember everything that was on the outside of that scene, and that's always fun for me. But it's also strange for me then thinking, like, a viewer who was not there for all this, what narrative are they able to see from it? And so by the time I've done all this and have it all worked out, and it's like now it's on paper, it's ready to go onto the canvas or onto the wood, whatever it is like so refined and locked. That is what it is once it's there. I mean, of course, it's never exactly what you want when you finish. Every painter will tell you that. You have just great aspirations, and what comes out is like, maybe I'm a perfectionist, but you can make a better one. Let's get into the next one.
So between photography and painting, you do like refined drawing before you jump into painting?
No, it's not completely refined. I think if I had more time, then it would be pretty much all I would do at the beginning of these paintings. Just drawings take me almost as long as, not as long as a painting, that's crazy, but it could take me 3 days to get a drawing super accurate to then start a painting. If I do things in this route where I'm like super fast with it, and then now I have perfect reference so I can work with it, it happens so much faster, so much easier.
Okay, so what's the lock-in stage then? You mentioned once the plan's sort of locked in. I was thinking, well, it was a refined drawing. That's my plan. What's your plan? Is it a digital composition, or like what's the lock-in stage where you're like, okay, after this point, it's going to be what this is?
It is that like the photograph and digital composition once they're put together. Like once that is, so I'll print it out, and now I have it sitting right next to my canvas, and I can paint it again within a reasonable amount of accuracy to what I've put together. I'll use it to help mix paint, and I have like all like little tricks and stuff to make sure that things get as close as I'd like them to get there. But yeah, I mean, it's really once I have that printed, I have my reference, I'm ready to go and just start painting until it's done.
Okay, very cool. And do you tend to work on multiple pieces at once just because oil dries slowly, or do you focus on one until it's complete and move on to the next?
Well, with my first show, I made that mistake of I'm going to just work on one piece at a time, and it was so silly how long it took to finish everything. You don't think about how often you do the same thing. Like if you're say cooking, right? You're making some sort of stew, and you got to chop up some carrots, you got to chop up some onions, you got to chop up some potatoes, and you start chopping all these things. You throw them all in the pot, that's fine. But if you chop the carrots, then you wash the knife and put it away. Then you went back over, pulled the knife back out. Now you're going to chop, like, it doesn't make any sense at all. And I didn't think about it until I was halfway through making that show. I was like, I've been doing this for months, and I'm afraid I won't even finish on time. What is this? And so a friend of mine, Matthew Grabelski, he was like, oh, dude, there's so many things I do that just, it drives me insane to have to do this, but I do it, and then it just makes life so much easier, which is like I do pretty elaborate underpaintings. They're almost completely realized paintings by the time I'm done with them. But that paint doesn't just exist. I have to mix those paints. And so instead I've just mixed giant tubes of those paints. So now I have this paint. I still have tubes that are sitting on my table now that I mixed 4 or 5 years ago. Basically, after that solo, I just started mixing that paint into tubes, and I still have them sitting on my desk. But it's something that cuts a corner and makes life so much easier. So now when you're working on all these pieces, you can just underpaint them all. Just start one and just move down the line, assembly line style, and then now you have, maybe this painting has a lot of pink in it, and this one has a little blue in it, and then maybe they share the same palettes, and now you can paint some bits of them at the same time, and it just makes it easier to kind of... It makes it easier to finish them in a reasonable amount of time, but also it lets you conceptualize what the entire show looks like while you're still working on it.
Okay, interesting. Do you think, so I can definitely see that, how seeing kind of a cohesive cross-piece perspective can allow them to be more, I guess, talk to one another in different ways. But do you find the context switching difficult? Like, hey, I'm focused on this one idea, I shift over to this next idea. Are you able to kind of pick up and shift like that?
Yeah, I mean, I just have a really low attention span. And so And so, it's really nice to just break away from one. And like a lot of artists will attest to this too. That you start a painting and you're like 100% excited, and then you get halfway through and you are significantly less excited because it's starting to really take shape, and it doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like yet. And you're just, oh, I miss that great feeling of starting a piece. So when you have multiples going, you don't hit that fatigue. You hit that point. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I can't do this anymore. Let's pick this one up and just kind of work on it for a little bit. And even once you're done, say, everything went to plan, you learned so much along the way that you started at that 100%, and then you're excited at the end only like 80% because you're like, man, I learned a lot on this one and but I'm past this point, so next time I'll do better than that.
Are you like some people where once you're done with the piece, you just don't want to see it anymore? You're like, oh, I don't want to see that anymore.
Yeah, I'm definitely that dude. I've talked to Matthew Grabowski about this. He always brings up this quote from Lord Leighton, which is, what is it? Every painting finished is another idea ruined. And it's, it's something that you can look back on the pieces anytime I've seen them after a good time has passed. So maybe I just happened to, oh, wow, I didn't know you bought one of my pieces, and I get to go to that collector's place. I see my piece. I do enjoy it so much more now that I've had some distance from it. It's been out of my house for a long enough period that I can look at it and go, oh yeah, I remember how I fixed this or how I learned to do this.
Oh, that's cool. I can definitely understand that. So let's talk about what you have coming up. What does the rest of 2021 look like for you? Like both in terms of what you're doing with ThinkSpace, but also your own personal work.
Yeah. So with ThinkSpace, it is a jam-packed year, it looks like. The schedule looks incredible, and I know it only really at a glance. There hasn't been a year where there are this many shows that I wish I had almost too much money for. Seeing those Georgico works come in, I am just like, oh, it makes my stomach hurt. They're so beautiful. Just phenomenal job on both of them. And Brad Winfin's stuff, so great as well. I'm very excited to see this show come together. So yeah, we have a really big year planned for ThinkSpace. It's really hard to see what the norm is going to be because we're still watching the world open up after COVID.
Sure.
And I can't imagine that we're going to have, knock on wood or something. I can't imagine that we're going to have a lot of the same challenges come last quarter this year that we had last year. So there's possibly there could be art fairs or something again, assuming that they're not still problematic as super spreading events, So it's really hard to tell what's going on with that. Or also, what's happening with just digital stuff and NFTs and all this other stuff that's going on. It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what happens for the next year. But for me, that part's much easier. I'm painting for group shows right now mostly. So I have a piece that'll be in the Bishop Museum as part of Powwow's 10-year anniversary show as co-curated by ThinkSpace. So that's super cool. And it's a 24 by 24 inch piece, which I don't get
that's big.
Many chances to work on stuff that big. Yeah. Work on a lot of smaller works, I guess just out of necessity. My studios have always been pretty small. So it's just easier to work on a smaller piece, and I've gotten into that mode. This will be a decent sized piece, so I'm excited to work on that. And then I'll be in I guess depending on how much time I have, a couple of group shows with Antler Gallery, next of which I'd have to check that date again. But I'll be showing at Antler Gallery. My piece is due on the 22nd of July. Sorry if that's wrong, guys. I'll check the schedule and be 100%.
Well, that's 4 months away, so I think that's probably okay to miss the day by one day or something.
Yeah, I try to keep my calendar and everything straight, but it's
No, that's good.
Yeah. And then I'm starting work on my solo already. So my next solo is in June of 2022.
Nice.
And so I'm starting that up now, trying to give myself an ample amount of time. A year is normal for a lot of people. I think I can do what I'm looking to do in 13, 14 months. So starting very soon just to kind of put myself at ease.
Very cool. No, that's awesome. And compared to your last two shows, I guess 2017, 2019, how is this show, do you think, will compare as far as size, number of pieces? It's bigger, smaller, about the same?
Well, it's kind of hard to judge because the last two shows are both in the same space. So it was easy for me to take a look at the space and go, okay, I would actually like to do this, that, and the other this time. I started planning sizes of pieces for that show before I even knew what I was going to paint. I just knew I want this to be like what is it? I had a 16 by 32. I wanted a piece that was a 1:2 ratio, but then I wanted two 12 by 16s next to it so that they had this awesome book-ended long and then blow on the sides. And it's been like, we're brand new in this space, and even though I see it every day, I still haven't like really wrapped my head on how do I want to rock this space. I always do at least one big piece just so I can have some fun on something big with a lot of just like great detail in it, and then do some smaller pieces that can hold the same sort of impact, and then like some really small ones just for people in my collecting bracket. Maybe you want something of mine, but don't want to or what have you. Can't buy something larger. Maybe your collection won't allow something so big. So yeah, there'll be like a variety of different sizes for the show.
Very cool. Do you find it hard to being involved in hanging shows and also creating work for shows, do you find strategizing about how you're going to lay the space out is more present in your mind than maybe if you didn't work with the gallery? Because I mean, it's just from the way you described it, how you were saying, I wanted this piece with bookended. Like, I don't know that everybody thinks about that. Like, that's an interesting kind of thought process as far as how you're planning your show out.
Well, yeah, so I have blueprints of all the for both gallery spaces, and I mean, even say I didn't, because we have some artists that are like this as well. They'll hit us up, hey, can you give me the dimensions of the room, or if you have it, an exact blueprint, and some of which have taken the time to make little maquettes of the room.
Esau does that, doesn't he? Didn't he do that for the? I saw that on Instagram. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
It's incredible. When I talk to them about it, they seem almost more excited to make the maquette than paint. They're like, oh my God, it was so awesome. So I used SketchUp to do this, and then I got it to the right scale and this and that. And so like I've become that guy in a way. I mean, I'm not making physical ones because that's just, again, very short on time. But I do know the blueprints for the place, and I know I can look at it frequently and go, that would be really dope if I could get this to fit this way. And so yeah, with the new space, it's, it'll be like a new challenge. I'm excited to take it on, though.
Very cool. Awesome. So where can people find you online so they can stay up to date with the latest?
Awesome. Yeah, so you can go to my website. I'm kenflewellyn.com. That's FLEWELLYN. It'll also be underneath the podcast, the name of this. And then I'm also just Ken Flewellyn on Instagram. Super easy.
Awesome. Very cool. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
I think it'd be great if you got Matthew Grabelski on this show. Like, he's definitely a fun dude to talk to. Longtime friend of mine. Him and I have showed together for, I don't know. So him and I showed with Cannibal Flower, like long time ago. So we've been in a lot of the same shows for a while. Fascinating painter. He's into, or at least inspired by a lot of the same painters that I am as well, like these 19th century academics. He's like in that category of like oil painters. He loves like Bouguereau and all this, and I'm more of like a Jerome sort of dude, right? But yeah, very interesting guy. He's lived a very strange life. He's an astrophysicist, if you didn't know.
No, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
He's a weird dude. So yeah, I think that would be he'd be a fun guest to have.
Awesome. Great choice. I appreciate it, Ken. And thank you so much, man, for coming on this. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
All right, cool. Sweet. So we made it through.
Awesome.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ken. It was interesting how Ken sort of framed a lot of the opportunities and career moves that he's made over the years as having been in the right place at the right time, or sort of like happenstance. But if you think about it, that's just how life is. It's this complex series of decisions and events that sculpt you into exactly the person that you are. And if any number of those things had gone slightly differently, you might be in an entirely different place, doing entirely different things. But that version of you would also think it was some miraculous series of events that got them to where they are. It's sort of mind-blowing when you think about it. And think about the fact that it's billions of these complex series of decisions and events all running simultaneously and brushing into one another's lives, affecting the course of one another's lives in profound and largely unquantifiable ways. Like, it's insane. But bring it back to Ken. he's he's the one who put that energy out into the world and set the dominoes up in just the right ways to make those things possible. So I definitely think it's worth giving credit for that, for sure. Be sure to follow Ken's Instagram to keep up with what he's got going on for the rest of the year and into 2022. It sounds like, he's going to have some work at a few different group shows, including the big powwow event ThinkSpace is curating, as well as a group show at Antler Gallery. And then next summer is when he'll be debuting his next body of work, which I believe is his third solo show at ThinkSpace, and the first one in their new location, so that's pretty exciting. So thanks again to Ken for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could really help out if you're enjoying the show would be to check out the show's new Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. As always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.